One thing we don't get to see very often is that developers step out of their comfort zone and try something different than what they're known for. Obviously, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but nobody wants something good to get stale due to oversaturation. Sometimes it's good for a developer to take a break from their flagship franchise and make something else, even if it results in this.
Whoa, what?
Case in point with probably one of the most unique diversions from a popular franchise, Catherine, and its 2019 re-release, Catherine Full Body. Catherine, originally released in 2011, is a puzzle game developed by Atlus and directed by Katsura Hashino, the same guy who directed the Persona series of games. Yes, this is Persona's diversion from its format. It's not directly connected to the Persona games aside from a few cameos, but it not only has the same team directing it, but the same Persona-esque vibe to it. I'd even say this was the basis for Persona 5's art direction. You can see it with Catherine's UI design. And much like the Persona franchise, Catherine later got a re-release with added content. It does change a few things in the story, sorta, so I'll start with talking about the original Catherine and then talk about what Full Body added and changed later. One more thing, don't worry about plot spoilers, I'll only be talking about the first few hours of the game plot-wise. In Catherine, you play as Vincent Brooks, just your everyday guy, lives in a crappy apartment, spends most of his free time at a bar, has nightmares where if he dies in the dream, he dies in real life, normal stuff. It's made clear early on that Vincent has been in a relationship with his girlfriend for a long time. His girlfriend's name is Catherine, with a K. Vincent starts to have inner turmoil about whether or not he's ready to marry Catherine. And if only to stress himself out more, he wakes up after another nightmare only to find a different girl in his bed. This is Catherine, with a C. Now Vincent must figure out how to fix the situation he's in, decide who he wants to stay with, and keep surviving each nightmare so he doesn't, die. And from there, things just get worse and worse for Vincent. Your decisions on what to say to the other characters will determine what outcome you get at the end of the game. It's all based on where you are on this alignment meter thing. So much like the Persona series, the social half of the game is just as important as the actual game part of the game. And because of this, Catherine's cast of characters are all very strong. Vincent's friends and the bar patrons you interact with throughout the game all have their own character arcs that they go through that are separate from Vincent's story. And all of these characters are very likable, especially the main friend group of Toby, Johnny, Orlando, and Erica. They all play off each other really well, and you get the feeling that they are genuinely concerned for Vincent when he starts deteriorating given his circumstance. Of course, both Catherines are well designed and written as well. K. Catherine is all no-nonsense and mature, while genuinely caring about Vincent and is trying to look out for him, even if she can come off as controlling. C. Catherine is the complete opposite. She's more bubbly and immature, always looking for something fun to do, and clearly puts out more than K. Catherine does. And I think C. Catherine does care about Vincent, but it's obvious she's not looking for commitment, rather just looking for a good time. And of course, there's the main character, Vincent. You really do see him go from being lost and not being sure what to do with his life to knowing what he wants out of life and being able to take control, be it deciding to go with one of the girls or going into a different path. Plus, Vincent is just a lovable guy. I mean, he did cheat on his girlfriend and let it escalate, but his situation, you being like that too, He's just a screw-up, guys. It's okay. Okay, so the main meat of this game is the nightmares Vincent has every night. The goal is to climb to the top of the tower as it collapses below you. You do so by moving blocks around as you create sort of a staircase up the tower. What makes this work is that the blocks connect via edges, so as long as you keep connecting the edges, you can figure your way out some tight situations. It's one of those easy to pick up, hard to master kind of games. The first few levels are pretty easy, but later in the game, the level difficulty shoots through the roof, especially since new blocks keep getting added in. You got cracked blocks that break after a few uses, trap blocks that will kill you if you stand on them, ice blocks you'll slip on if you try to walk on them, bomb blocks that'll blow up and turn the surrounding blocks into cracked blocks. Yeah, the game gets hard, especially if you play on the hardest difficulty. And that's because the developers got too good at the game, so they had to make it harder and harder. Damn right they did. You need quick thinking and a mastery of the game's mechanics if you want to stand a chance to beat the game on the hardest difficulty. I mean, Catherine isn't the hardest game out there, but it is very difficult later on. The nightmare stages do go hand in hand with the daytime segments though, and you'll find yourself in sort of a routine for every chapter in the game. Here is the daily routine when you play Catherine. After whatever cutscenes are due to play have concluded, you'll gain control of Vincent to explore the bar. You'll receive text messages you'll want to reply to impact your alignment. You'll also want to talk to everyone in the bar. Certain characters will come and go as you talk to people, so you may want to make some extra saves so you don't miss anyone. That's because these conversations can impact both your alignment and the outcome of the character in question's story. All the while, you want to make sure to drink 2 drinks to fill up your intoxication meter. The higher the meter, the faster you are in the nightmare, and apparently hangovers aren't a thing in this universe. One other thing to note is that each of the 4 drinks have a unique trivia for each night, so you might as well drink one of each drink every night. I mean, the trivia isn't needed, but I like them, don't look at me like that. Once you leave the bar, you go into the nightmare stage for that chapter. There's usually at least 3 stages, but later on they add on more than that for each night. In between stages, you enter a landing where you talk to sheep people who are also climbing the tower.
Newsflash, fuck you!
Much like the bar, you'll want to exhaust all dialogue to impact alignment and side character stories. You'll also learn new tactics to think about when tackling the next stage. Before entering each stage, you'll get a loaded question that will heavily impact your alignment. Then you'll move on to the next stage. You do this until you reach the final stage for the night, in which you'll be chased by a boss representing some of Vincent's fears like commitment, parenthood, huge asses. And after you complete that stage, Vincent wakes up and then the next day begins. You'll repeat this process for about 7 nights, but it'll fly by quickly, I promise you. The plot just keeps getting more and more engaging, and the nightmare stages are so fun that you'll want to get to the next one as soon as you can. Now would be a good time to talk about the changes Catherine Fullbody brings to the game. The plot remains the same, however this time there's a third girl named Rin that Vincent runs into before the game's plot begins. Rin has amnesia and only remembers that she wants to play the piano, so Vincent helps her get a job at the bar he frequents in the room next to his at his apartment to stay at. The game remains pretty much the same for a while aside from a few differences in both gameplay and other things. As for the other things, of course now Rin will show up at the bar to talk to, as well as 2 new sheep to talk to in the nightmare stages with their own plot lines to help them with. Returning characters have new dialogue to discover, and the whiskey drink gets replaced with wine, cause full body, you know, like wine. As for gameplay, they added an optional mode to add in new large and oddly shaped blocks to make the game a bit harder, but even in the original mode the stages have been remixed with some new blocks being added in later on. But the biggest addition is, due to story reasons, when you get too close to the falling blocks they will slow down to give you more time to work with. I might not be the biggest fan of this, almost feels like a forced handicap, but it's a godsend on the harder levels, and when it's gone you'll wish it was there. The big thing with Catherine Fullbody is Rin, since she is a new third option Vincent can choose to be with. Rin is a pretty good character too. If K Catherine is maturity and C Catherine is immaturity, then Rin is innocence, pre-amnesia and want to help others being extensions of that. So with all of that, you'd think you should just get Catherine Fullbody since it has more content, right? Well, in my opinion, no, and here's why. The game pushes Rin a little too hard for it to feel like you actually have a choice. I mean, you do have a choice, but Rin not only has way more screen time than the other 2 girls, but she matters more to the plot than the other 2 do. And that does make the plot play out slightly different up until the end. You can still get the same endings you can get in the original Catherine, but the events that transpire before the final levels are different. But okay, let's say you do go with Rin. The new content with her is worth your time, yeah? Well, kinda? You get a whole new night to do, but okay, I won't spoil anything, but let me try to explain it like this. So in the original Catherine, of course, there are endgame reveals about the mystical aspect of the game with the nightmares, as well as some twists that reveal other mysteries. Those twists are still in full body, but when you go down the Rin path, you get even more twists that involve characters in the world's mythology. And there's just one twist too many that was so incredibly disappointing to me that I am upset that I got that ending. Its only purpose for being there is to be another twist, but literally nothing hints to it up until you get to those last few levels. Just because you don't expect a twist doesn't make it good. And this last one in Catherine Fullbody just doesn't work for me. I'm not saying that Catherine Fullbody is a bad game though, far from it. Other than the best Rin ending, the only other complaint I have is that there's a little too much different to warrant it to be a replacement for the original Catherine. Something like Persona 5 Royal works better in this scenario, as it is definitely a good replacement for the original Persona 5. Its new elements are incorporated much better than Catherine Fullbody's are. It makes me wish there was a way within Full Body to play the original Catherine, but Full Body is still a perfectly fine way to play Catherine. Great characters, challenging gameplay, and have I mentioned how great this soundtrack is yet? Shoji Megura brings us a perfect mix of smooth jazz for the bar segments and intense remixes of classical works for the nightmare segments. It's all just mwah! Catherine is such a unique romp that it does bring into question the concept of there being a sequel. Catherine's story works best as a one-off, so there's no reason to bring these characters back. But another game that takes place in the same world with different characters would be cool. It would give them a chance to work with the gameplay more and create a new story that can tackle different romantic issues. But personally, I don't think there's much room for improvement. Catherine is a very tight experience, and I think it's one of Atlus's best. Whether or not it's actually a part of the Persona timeline or the giant Megami Tensei multiverse is yet to really be determined, but I think it stands on its own as a perfect unique experience for anyone looking to experiment with something new, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean, right?